lots of great stories and arcs coming out of Australia's win. And we'll talk about all of them. But before that, I just want to talk about the whole Usman Khawaja black armband situation. And, we've seen in cricket how the game has taken a firm stand with respect to some sort of activism in the past. BLM comes to mind. Everyone took a knee. Those who didn't take a knee, they, did some other version of a show of solidarity. Then we've seen other things, the LGBTQ movement. And Ukraine wasn't a big thing in cricket, but it was in sport. So when Usman Khawaja writes all lives are equal on his shoe, why is the ICC telling him that all lives are not equal? Do you see a double standard there, or what? I just want to know your thoughts on it.
Look, it's a weird world that we're in. The truth is, I remember I covered the game when Mo and Ali had the Palestine wristbands. I think
it was a wristband.
Yeah. I covered that game, and there was a lot of people who were very upset. And I said, look, at the end of the day, boards have to actually sanction players and have to stop players from doing it, because you would end up with like a million different messages in, all the time, or they have to get on board like that COVID season in the NBA where the players had, so much stuff going on in the court. They had, whatever they wanted on the back of their shirts and everything else. It kind of has to be one way or another. And in a game like cricket where everything is so incredibly political, right? That was always going to be another contentious issue. There are certainly, a lot of people who weren't going to be taken with that. But you can't actually stop athletes doing this. That's the most important thing. I think we've gone past. Do you know the story of Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, the NBA player?
Yes, I do. Actually.
So when he did it, the NBA could essentially just move on from him. Right? They could just say, "Oh, you're not going to get any contracts anymore." I don't think you would have now an NBA player who's scoring, 23, 24 points a game, one of the best shooters in the game, just disappear because of political beliefs or anything else. You will get Colin Kaepernick type players who will disappear, who are a little more on the fringe, and you can push them to the side. But those main players, Usman Khawaja is not going to get dropped. The ICC is not going to send him for 20 games. There might have to be sanctions just to stop everyone else doing it. But right-wing athletes do this, left-wing athletes do this. You sometimes get weird messages from athletes that, that don't make any sense. I always find it funny. We always say that there should be no politics in sport, where I don't know how you stop politics being involved in anything. And, politicians get involved in sport all the time. And there's this idea that someone who hosts a TV show can come out and say something, but someone who's a professional athlete who's got to the top of their game can't. Where do we draw the line? I understand there's things with sponsors and everything else. But the truth is, if a player really wants to say something, they're probably going to say it. And there's a long history of athlete activism. And many of those athletes are now remembered to be absolute legends, right? From, the John Carlos, Tommy Smith,
what about that Australian runner from the Olympics?
He's the third one. He's the third one there, right? But if you go back, Muhammad Ali and Arthur Ashe and what's his name, Fiisa Lalisa, like all these different athletes who've spoken up about different things. Women athletes who've spoken up about their treatment compared to male athletes, and generally those athletes are remembered better. But if you do something like that, I don't think it's any different. This is going to sound very weird, but I was thinking about this today. It's no different from the person who comes in to your work and sprouts off their own political opinions quite a bit. Eventually, there is a possibility that the boss might say, we don't want that anymore. This is causing division. This is causing problems. We're going to move on from you. There will be repercussions. Free speech is a concept that is very misunderstood. Free speech doesn't mean you get to say whatever you want without consequence. There isn't consequence-free speech. So when Usman Khawaja does that, he's obviously going to get a lot of people from different communities who are going to be very upset. But that is part of what he's doing, and he's made that choice. And there are going to be some times when there are going to be players who say things. I mean, if you want to go back, Ian Botham talking about why it should be okay for him to kill, was it deer? Over and over again. He was making political points, right? During his career, he made lots of them. Lots of players have done them. We now have Pat Cummins. We have the Muslim players in the Western countries not wanting the alcohol sponsorship on them. We have, women's teams who are, also saying we don't want to be sponsored in this particular way. All these sorts of things happening. The Fair Break tournament not having gambling sponsors, for instance. All these different things are happening in cricket and in global sport. And the idea that the rest of us are seeing all this stuff and the athletes aren't, and they're not going to make comments about it, is kind of ridiculous, right? Like, you and I are going to make comments about things that we care about over and over again, and so are the athletes. But the problem is that, maybe one of the most famous ones is the Daryl Morey one in the NBA, where he criticized China, and that cost the NBA, millions and millions of dollars. And, eventually it leaves Houston. Probably both sides were probably hoping for that. But you can't stop people saying what they think. Like, it's illegal to be say anti-Semitic things in Germany. People still say anti-Semitic things in Germany. These things don't stop, and I think that's the most important thing to remember from athletes. I don't see why they should be held to a different account to anyone else. But as I said, there is no such thing as consequent free speech, right? Usman is not going to jail for what he said, but maybe there will be sponsors who won't want to be involved with Cricket Australia. Maybe there'll be stakeholders in Cricket Australia who won't want Usman Khawaja there. Maybe he won't get offered jobs, right? Afterwards. All those things are very, very possible. But those things have been happening for years upon years, right? We have a game where we still have, Mike Gadding and Graham Gooch very much involved with cricket, despite the fact that they went to play apartheid cricket, on those rebel tours. Cricket forgives a lot. My favorite one about all this sort of stuff is how, essentially, in the end, none of this matters, was when Muhammad Amir made his comeback and he was playing at Lord's again. And he was standing in front of a sponsor, and I can't remember, it was one of the financial sponsors of the ECB. So I just Googled them and just put in, that company, I can't remember who it was now, and fraud, or that company and crimes. And there's this huge skew of crimes of how they've ripped off like mum and pop investors, how they've done things where they propped up governments in various countries, how they committed financial fraud and everything else. And I put a tweet out going, Muhammad Amir is standing in front of this sign for this sponsor. Cricket is very forgiving. So many people were upset. Right? So many people were upset because they were like, you can't compare Muhammad Amir to a bank. And I was like, yeah, but we do forgive people. And if people make us money, we do forgive them, right? We're sitting here talking about David Warner, right? I know people who told me absolutely he should never have played for Australia again. I can't remember the last time I've heard that. Right? After a while, things get forgotten and things move on. Usman Khawaja is already probably a problematic person in certain parts of Australian culture because he says things that he believes and has before, and has talked about racism within cricket and treatment within cricket, and things that microaggressions and all these different things. He's going to continue to talk about them, Bayram, though, because he's a human being, right? That's what they do.
Absolutely. And with me personally, you brought up the Moeen wristband incident, and back then I remember I even had the opinion that sports shouldn't be mixed with politics. But then post BLM, I just felt like cricket has taken that plunge forward, and these sort of things, even though they polarize opinion, Usman Khawaja is just speaking his own truth. And I thought that it wasn't as much a political statement as much as it was humanitarian. Of course, there are layers to this, and I'm not disagreeing with that. But I mean, he's the people's champ. He is a vocal person. He has been throughout his career. Like you said, he has many admirers and many people who probably hate him for that. And I'm just happy that he continues to do that, because we need characters like that in sport. I enjoy it.
Exactly. Sure. Just to go into the politics, it's interesting. When I started my career, we were told that all over and over again. Politics should never be in sport. When I started to do Death of a Gentleman, I was like, wait a minute, how do you take politics out of sport? I don't even understand how you're supposed to do it, right? And at a certain point, it's a really naive take, and it doesn't hold any water at all. Also, let's just go back. Muhammad Ali, right, was a really important person because of what he did. The West Indian cricket team were a political force at times, right? Basil D'Oliveira was a political force, even when he didn't want to be, right? The Pakistan and Bangladeshi women's teams, the Afghanistani women's team, right? These are all political, and a lot of them would choose not to be political, right? The classic Basil D'Oliveira tried to stay away from politics as much as he could, while politicians were literally staring at him. And you look at cricket. Cricket is almost the most political sport. And we're never going to disentangle it from politics. Jay Shah
is the son of Modi's right-hand man.
You say that, that's not even a big one in cricket, right? Imran Khan literally was told by the CEO of the PCB, this is how we should structure cricket. And he went, no, we're not doing that. Has Pakistan had 2 leaders who were first-class cricketers of recent times? Like, you know, it's Ranatunga, Sanas Jayasuriya, right? It's
Shakib is going into politics.
Shakib, Srisanth Ran, right? Gautam Gambhir. There's heaps of these sorts of things happening in cricket and politics all the time. And that's before you get to the bigger stuff, right? You know, John Howard trying to take over the ICC. The formation of the ICC was a political act, right? All these things are political. And I understand people who say we don't want that, but I always say the same thing. When you can find a way to disentangle politics from anything, we'll take it out of sport. But the truth is that politics does intertwine with every part of life in the same way that business does. You can't take business out of cricket. You can't take politics out of cricket. And if that's going to be the case for Jay Shah, or that's going to be the case for Imran Khan, or that's going to be the case for Malcolm Turnbull, who's upset that the Australian team have played with sandpaper, or whatever that may be, then it also what's his name? Was it Rishi Sunak got involved in the Johnny Bairstow? All that sort of stuff. If those things are going to happen, I think it's very fair. If Rishi Sunak has an opinion on a stumping, right, then I think Usman Khawaja can have an opinion on what is happening in one part of the world that he is following as well. No one's saying that Rishi Sunak is an expert on cricket, and no one's saying that Usman Khawaja is an expert on you know, the Israel-Palestine conflict. But to say he can't have an opinion, I'm sorry, I don't even know how that would work, right? And it won't. So he's going to, and we then have to deal with the repercussions of that the same way we have to deal with the repercussions of everything else that goes on in cricket.
Absolutely. And sometimes, you know, politics and capitalism, they clash. And like you said, there are repercussions. But anyway, I think we've spent enough time on this.